Good evening, your times now. I'm Madhavdas GK, and a month after the tragic Air India plane crash in Ahmedabad that claimed the lives of 260 people, a preliminary report has been released by the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. This is the first official account of what went wrong with the AI-171 flight seconds after takeoff from the Ahmedabad airport. Now, as per the preliminary report, fuel cutoff switches of both engines transitioned from run to cut-off position one after another within a time gap of 1 second. This led to the snapping of fuel supply to both engines, causing them to lose power. However, the report doesn't mention what caused the fuel switches to move. Was it due to human action, a mechanical failure, or electronic malfunction? That critical question remains unanswered and is the focus of the ongoing investigation. The preliminary report also contains a paraphrased account of the communication that took place inside the cockpit pertaining to the fuel cutoff. According to the AAIB report, one of the pilots is heard asking the other, why did he cut off the fuel switch? The other pilot responded that he did not do so. After the fuel supply cut off, the pilot scrambled to save the aircraft. Within 10 to 15 seconds of the fuel cutoff, they moved both the fuel switches back to the run position. Both the engines began automatic restart sequences, with engine 1 showing signs of recovery and engine 2 attempting to relight. However, the recovery could not be achieved due to the insufficient time and altitude. Now, Times Now gets you a real-time analysis from a simulator cockpit explaining what would have happened.
That's the million-dollar question, that what happened in this particular time period, because for 31 seconds the flight was in the air, starting from the time it took a lift from the ground. At 3 seconds, what we got to know, we are in this flight simulator. This is Airbus 320. I'm joined by Captain Alok Singh, who will be describing for the viewers that what exactly happened in this time period.
Actually, if you look here, this is engine number 1. This is engine number 1, engine number 2. In Airbus, we call it master switches. In Boeing, we call it fuel shutoff. So basically, all they are doing is supplying fuel.
So I took a lift.
Yes. So in this particular case, the pilots, they advanced the throttle for takeoff. And aircraft accelerated to a speed of 180 knots. Now this airspeed has increased. And
so
now
we are taking off. It's a 1, 2, 3. Now I am telling you why have you switched it off.
At this time, if you see, both the engines has been switched off. Engine electronic control, it will try to automatically give continuous ignition to the engine to enable the pilots to start the engines. They started to they tried to start the
exactly
engines.
in 30 seconds.
Absolutely. One of the engine did not responded. One engine responded for the startup. It started to spool up, but it was too late because by the time the aircraft already crashed.
I don't think we should jump into any conclusions on this. I truly believe we have the most wonderful workforce in terms of pilots and the crew in the whole world. I have to appreciate all the efforts the pilots and the crew in this country are putting into the aviation. They are the backbone of this civil aviation. They are the primary resource of civil aviation, and we care for the welfare and the well-being of our pilots also. So let's not jump to any conclusions at this stage. Let us wait for the final report.
While there are several questions which remain unanswered, the preliminary report has ruled out some of the theories which were doing the rounds earlier. The report has categorically ruled out fuel contamination because they say the fuel samples taken from Bowser's tested found satisfactory. There was also a theory whether the flaps were misconfigured. They have said that the flap handle in the 5-degree position is consistent with a normal takeoff, although experts have said that even if the flaps were wrong, with the engine full throttle, it could have taken off. Now, there's also the possibility of bird strike is what we were told. And now the AAIB preliminary report says that there's no significant bird activity observed in the vicinity of the flight path. Whether there was a weight overload is also some amount of speculation. The takeoff weight was 213,401 kilograms, which is within permissible limits. There was another factor which was cited, which was possibility of whether the thrust problem was there, whether it was fully in the full thrust or not. And the flight data reveals that thrust levers remained forward until the impact took place. That is very significant as well. Now, notably, the fuel control switches, which are under the scanner, were flagged as a potential issue by the US FAA on Boeing planes in 2018. This preliminary report has made a reference to the 2018 warning issued by the FAA. 7 years ago, the FAA released a special airworthiness information bulletin carrying an advisory to inspect the locking feature of fuel switches to ensure engagement. The advisory says it should be checked whether the switch can be moved without lifting up the switch. According to the preliminary report, recommended inspections were not performed because the bulletin was advisory rather than being mandatory. However, the AAIB preliminary report has not recommended any action against these entities either. When we're talking about Boeing, which is the aircraft manufacturer, at the moment there's no action recommended. Remember, it's a preliminary report, it's not a conclusive one. At the moment, there's also no action recommended against General Electric, which is the engine manufacturer. That's also something which is very specific. Air India, the operator of Boeing 7878 aircraft, at the moment, no action recommended as well. Let's quickly open this up and take it across to our guest joining us. Aurobindo Handa is a former DG of the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. He's also a chairman of the Accident Investigation Group. We have Alistair Rosenshine, who's a former pilot of the Boeing 747 and aviation consultant. John Cox is a former pilot and CEO of Safety Operating Systems. Captain Amit Singh is aviation expert and founder of Safety Matters. We have Anurag Mittal, who's a captain as far as check airman and a trainer as well on the show. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. Mr. Aurobindo Handa, let me begin with what the Pilots Association is saying. They are looking at it as some kind of attempt at pinning the blame on the pilot and exonerating the aircraft manufacturer, the engine manufacturer and the airline that is operating. Do you view it from that perspective, Mr. Handa? Let me begin with you.
Yeah, Jai Hind, everybody. I have also seen a letter written by the president of Alpha. The issue is, whatever I have read that report, let me be very, very clear about it. It doesn't pinpoint any probable cause. So once you are coming down to fuel shut-off cocks or whatever you say in fuel, the engine start switches, it will, now the AIB team will have to work on it to pinpoint whether that particular thing, whatever they are saying, the recorders are telling them, how it has moved. So what has happened, they have found it out. How and why it has happened, so now work on it.
Okay, but
so we should wait.
Is there a possibility? So I just want to get clarity from you. Is there a possibility of saying that there is some kind of mechanical failure? Is that still within the realm of possibility? Because the report hasn't specifically said that it moved because of the pilot's error or any kind of human error. Mr. Handa.
Absolutely. We cannot rule out, at this stage, we should not rule out anything. We should work on everything, all possible aspects of that, because it's a gated switch. I believe it's a spring-loaded switch. So we should work on all the thing. And there has been a case of, and which you are telling that there was an advisory issued in 2018. So I'm sure the investigators would work on it.
Right. Let me go across to John Cox.
To be very honest, the report which has the...
Yeah, complete your point. Complete your point.
Yeah. See, the report doesn't suggest anything that the pilots, it's amounting to pilot error as of now. Okay. That's my reading. That's all my reading. Now everyone has that liberty to translate it to his or
everyone has a liberty. It's a free country, absolutely. But let me bring in John Cox, who's a former pilot and CEO of the Safety Operating Systems. Mr. John Cox, we've seen a section of the Western media rush in to pronounce conclusion. They are of the view that this is indeed pilot error, that there is no other way the fuel switches could have moved, whereas the 2018 advisory is quite categorical, that there is very much a possibility of the locks not being operational. Mr. Cox.
I think first, let's look at the report, the preliminary report. AAIB did a good job. This is a factual, objective, incredible report. I accept it for what they have done, the work that they have done. There should not be any analysis or conclusions drawn in a preliminary report. So we have to view what has been provided in that light. That said, the 2018 safety alert was actually specifically for 737s. It was expanded to include 777s, 767s, 757s, and 787s. But the issue at hand was for 737s. The operators were to check and see if those switches could be moved. If they could be moved without lifting, they were to be replaced. As to whether the accident aircraft that was actually done remains at question. But if those switches were abnormal, meaning that if they didn't move normally, it would have required the pilots to have written that up. And all the 787 pilots that I have talked to, and I've got several friends flying the airplane, none of them have made any reference to any of those switches not being positive lock that you have to pull. The preliminary report is very good in that it says that the switches moved. It does not say who moved those switches, but it does. So, and we have to be, the AAIB was very careful in their wording, and I commend them for that. So we need to stick with the facts and let the evidence lead us where it leads us. If it's a pilot issue, fine. If it's a mechanical issue, fine. But we need to follow that approach.
Okay, Captain Amit Singh, I'd like you to come in on this. He says it's a factual report. It's used its wording very carefully, and there are n number of possibilities. But do you agree with Captain John Cox when he comes out to say that there is no question of this not working on the 787 because his experience and those he has worked with, he's never seen such a complaint ever arise in a 787. Is that anecdotal evidence, or do you think that is sufficient for us to rule it out? Captain Amit Singh.
Well, so far as the SAIB is there, the bulletin is there, we cannot rule it out unless that particular part is bench tested and it is confirmed that the locks were not working. So unless that confirmation comes in, there is always a possibility, even though it may be a very, very remote possibility, but we cannot rule it out. But the point here to be highlighted in the report is that when did the engine stop producing thrust? At one point, it says the fuel shut-off valves were closed at time 08:08:42, which means 3 seconds after getting airborne. And further down in the paragraph, they say that the RAT was deployed immediately after liftoff. So a RAT, if it is deployed immediately after liftoff, which means the engines have failed close to liftoff, right? So the engines may have stopped producing thrust before. Yes, the fuel, the fuel shut-off valves or the control switches may have been operated later, but there is no clarity on this. When did the engine stop producing thrust? So there is a doubt on that aspect.
Mr. Handa, would you like to come in on this? Because he says those, even though it's a matter of seconds, point is that these are aircraft which perform for precision. Do you agree with this perception that there is a mismatch in timelines, Mr. Handa?
No, I would like to go with the Cox statement that they have said that those levers moved from run position to cutoff position. So they have not said that the pilots did it, or so that is what. So there are A option, B option, C option, which I'm sure AIB is going to work on it. That is what will take time. So let them work on it, and let's wait for that.
Okay, so you don't attach much importance to the timeline when it talks about the thrust lost or the time of the RAT deployment, because at least 3 seconds it would take for the RAT to deploy.
No, it will come out. It will come out. It is just like, nitpicking. It's just like nitpicking, but it will come out in the final reports. There will be much more
Captain
clearer,
Amit Singh, is this nitpicking? The timeline mismatch?
No. Well, what is the purpose of a preliminary report is it has to give factual information. Do we have factual information? No. We have bits and pieces of information which have been planted here. Either you give the DFDR readout and we can make out something out of it. You haven't given the DFDR readout, you have given bits and pieces. The cockpit voice recorder transcript has not been given. 2 sentences have been given. There is no timestamp on it. And who spoke, never mind, but timestamp has to be there. The CCTV image is given, but there's no timestamp on it. So how are we supposed to infer anything, or are we not supposed to derive any information from the preliminary report?
Okay, let me bring in some of the other panelists as well. Let me bring in some of those. I think those are three important points you're making. Alistair Rosenshine, typically in a preliminary report, are these details which Captain Amit Singh is mentioning, do they find place? Because the cockpit voice recorder, just one or two sentences, we have at the moment before us are being mentioned, which is that one pilot says, did you turn off the engine or did you flip the switch? The other one says, no, I didn't. The other aspect is that the entire conversation can perhaps throw more light, more data from the digital flight data recorder, and perhaps images with timestamps can provide more clues. What is your experience, Alistair Rosenshine, when it comes to such preliminary reports in the past?
Well, what this preliminary report has done has to focus on aspects that the AAIB inspectors think are relevant to the accident. Now, it can't escape one's notice that the point at which it said that the fuel was cut off coincides with the point at which pilots would normally raise the undercarriage. It is possible, I'm not suggesting this happened, but it is possible that it was a human error, but not a deliberate action to shut off the fuel. That is one thing. Another thing is it could still be electronic problem, which caused the shut-off and then the relighting or the attempted relighting of the engines. The systems are quite complex on the 787, and unless you understand them in great detail, you can't answer these questions with any definitive answer. But one thing this preliminary report does show quite conclusively is that the aircraft lost power, and that's what one of the pilots said when he made his mayday call, and the conversation between the two pilots, albeit only brief, if you take these two pilots as telling the truth, as they believe it, then neither of them shut down the engines. And you've still got to answer the question, well, how come the fuel was cut off? So maybe the levers weren't moved. Maybe it's electronically managed to shut it down and then relight it. These are questions which the final report's going to answer. To speculate at this point, I know people will speculate. They'll try and find out reasons and think they know the answer. None of us know the answer yet. But the AAIB have decided to narrow this down to the fact that the fuel was cut off. And so that is the one thing that we're certain of. And that's all the various facts we've seen and the video and the cause of the accident. And the timeline for relighting an engine, the 32-second flight, it's not possible to do so. And the other thing is that if the fuel was cut off to engines when they're close to maximum power, it's going to cause loss of power near instantaneously, as the fuel will run through the engines very, very quickly. And although the engines will be rotating, they won't be producing power. And so without the lift, the aircraft descends, and we've had this accident. So some people say that this preliminary report poses more questions than answers. I disagree with that. I think it actually removes many of the speculative reasons for this accident that people had, and it has narrowed it down to a double engine failure. And this has not happened before, and this is unique. And one of the reasons why many accidents today are unique is because we in the industry learn from previous accidents, and the pilots learn, the engineers learn, the manufacturers learn from the previous accidents.
Certainly.
So it's all narrowed down.
This is historic, because this is the first ever such crash with the Dreamliner after about 12 years of operations, and in that sense it has global ramifications, over 1,200 such aircraft flying. But that's also really the fear at the end of the day, isn't it, Captain Mittal, or Mickey as you're better known? Because at the end of the day, in the run-up to this entire report being released, we've seen how there have been reports published which have tried to fix the blame on the pilots. And, at the end of the day, the report isn't conclusive when it comes to the role of the pilots itself, because we've seen how whistleblowers have talked about the role of Boeing in the past. There have been all sorts of allegations that Boeing itself has faced. So there's a lot at stake over here, and there are many who are rushing into conclusions, it appears. Captain Mittal.
Yes, that's correct. I would go with what Captain John, and I'm sorry, I did not catch the other gentleman's name, who's also the 747 former pilot, saying, yes, the fact is, yes, the fuel engine switches were turned off and turned on. That's exactly what the report says. Why they were turned off? Why and who turned them off? That's still a mystery. It could also be like, if you get the full transcript, it's like, the biggest question is, the first action after rotation of an airplane is, the non-flying pilot always calls positive rate. And the flying person says, gear up. We don't have that conversation. And why was the gear handle still in the down position? And why did the fuel engine switches were moved instead of the gear switches? It could be that there was an engine failure and the pilots were attempting to relight, and that's why they turned the switch off and they turned the switch on. Who knows? That could be another side to the story.
Do you think that could have happened if one is asking the other who turned it off and one of them says, I didn't? Then is that really within the realm of possibility then? Because the cockpit voice recorder says something to the contrary, from what I understand.
Well, when confusion sets in, yes, it can happen. What happened is something starts going wrong in the cockpit. There are two pilots, yes, but for the first 30 seconds when something happened, it comes within of human, cognition, where it takes time to recognize what just happened. And a lot of times when, there's something going on, the adrenaline just puts in and we start doing things in the cockpit, which is not supposed to be done.
Right.
Or maybe they're trying to do the correct thing just to get things going again. So we really don't know what went out there. So I wouldn't blame anybody, but there is a lot of possibilities that this report does open up.
Well, and there's a lot at stake. There's a lot at stake for the engine manufacturer. There's a lot at stake for the airline manufacturer, the aircraft manufacturer, and the airline that's operating these aircraft. So all of these respectively have a lot at stake as well, riding with this investigation. But let me bring in Captain Sanjay Karve. Captain Karve, when it comes to Lion Air 610, whether it's Ethiopian Airlines 302, these are at least two of perhaps many more, and you can throw light on that, where instances where the initial blame was fixed on the pilots, but later it was figured out that something else really has happened as far as the aircraft itself is concerned. So therefore, it's that much more important to not rush in or jump into conclusions which hint even at human error or a pilot error in this case.
Madhav, I absolutely agree with you. But unfortunately, like the ex-DG AAIB has said, everyone is open or free to have his or her own perceptions. If you had watched the interview of Honorable Minister at Pune, his ending statement in the interview was, don't go by the statement or don't go by the CVR. Indian pilots are one of the best trained. That means there is a doubt now in the Minister of Civil Aviation himself that are my pilots at fault, because the AIB, out of 1.5 minutes of transcript from the time he's lined up till the time he's crashed, why has it put in only 1.5 sentence out in a public domain? Why not the entire transcript from the time he says rolling, airspeed alive, V1, V2, gear up? Why? Nothing. No warning calls, no audio warnings. Nothing is heard in the CVR. When you hear this 1.5 statement, did you switch off the fuel control? No, I didn't. And then you say there's a fault of fuel. Likely that people are going to jump the gun and say, yes, pilots are at fault. In fact, today afternoon, when I was watching BBC and CNN, they have very broadly declared, CVR clears the aircraft, pilots at fault. Why? Because of this. There was no harm in AIB. Or what is AIB of putting in the entire transcript? It has happened. It is their job. Whosoever is at fault, engine manufacturer, the aircraft manufacturer, the crew, the maintenance team, the 240 odd families need to know that. Right. Even if that 1 minute transcript is hurting someone, you cannot keep quiet. I have really not understood why only 1.5 sentence of that transcript has been put across in public domain. Your own minister has now an element of doubt and he's gone public saying, please don't jump to the conclusion by what it says. The Indian pilots are well trained. If the AIB's perception was, no, we are not blamed anyone. How is it that their own minister has to make a public statement? Why have you left it open-ended? Yes, they have done a good job in at least identifying the core issue, which all of us have been accepting right from day one, that there has been loss of thrust. We were not certain why. They have ruled out a lot of possibilities like fuel, bird hit, which is also very good. So there are not n number of options.
All right.
But leaving this option open-ended, they have actually left the pilot or the crew option open-ended, like not committing. Either they should have just kept quiet and said, look, This is our preliminary finding. The fuel shutoff lever seemed to have been operated and recycled. We have to wait for the detailed report to figure out who did it, why did it, or how it happened.
All right. We'll have to leave it there for the moment. Unfortunately, gentlemen, would have liked to have a much longer interaction because there are many points in this report that are worth discussing. But for the moment, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. Captain Anurag Mittal, as well as Captain Sanjay Karve, Captain Amit Singh, as well as Captain John Cox and Captain Alistair Rosentrain. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us your perspective.